This might have been the strangest dinner party in history. For one thing, Lazarus was there. Not long before, Lazarus had been dead. Then Jesus raised him back to life, an event that no doubt stirred up the entire village of Bethany. And it appears that this dinner party was given in Jesus' honor to thank him for raising Lazarus. As we'll see, John notes that Lazarus was reclining at the table with them, dining with them. What exactly do you say to a man who's just been raised from the dead? Do you ask him, well, how do you feel? But that's only part of the story. In fact, it's not even the most important part of the story. At some point, Mary did something that was so startling that it shocked Jesus' top men. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. And every part of what she did bothered them. That's why this story appears in 3 of the 4 Gospels. It appears in Matthew, Mark, and John. But as we will see, Mary knew Jesus in a way that his disciples didn't. She saw clearly what was about to happen to Jesus as he entered Jerusalem. If she didn't know the specific details, she knew that trouble was coming. She knew it was big trouble. So she knew Jesus was going to die. So in response, she prepared a gift that shocked the disciples. But Jesus absolutely loved it. The story begins in John chapter 12 this way. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany where Lazarus was, the one Jesus had raised from the dead. So they gave a dinner for him there. Martha was serving them, and Lazarus was one of those reclining at the table with him. Now think about it for a minute. This is Saturday night in Bethany, which as we know is a small village just outside of Jerusalem. In just a few hours, Jesus will enter Jerusalem riding on a donkey. Soon he will cleanse the temple, he will curse the fig tree, he'll teach in the temple courts, and he'll confront the rising tide of hatred that's coming from the religious leaders. Tonight is the last happy night he will know. Tomorrow, he begins his final journey to the cross. Tonight, they celebrate. Tomorrow, he will enter Jerusalem. And in 6 days, he'll be hanging on a cross. Now, as we ponder this setting and this story, our eyes rest on 2 people, Mary and Judas. Mary never says a word, and Judas says too much. One reveals her heart by what she does. The other reveals his by what he says. But today I want to focus on 2 questions that help us unpack this story. The first question is simply, what did Mary do? What did Mary do? Look at verse 3. Then Mary took a pound of fragrant oil, pure and expensive nard, anointed Jesus' feet, and wiped his feet with her hair. So the house was filled with the fragrance of the oil. Now, nard is an oil that's extracted from the root of the nard plant, which is grown in India. It was, as John notes, very expensive. A pound of nard equaled 300 denarii, as Judas reckoned it, meaning it cost the equivalent of about 9 months of salary for a common worker. It's hard for us to fathom or to think about that properly. In today's term, that's like spending $45,000 on a bottle of perfume. Who does that? $45,000, you can buy a nice vehicle. You can buy a nice car. But not only does she have a jar of expensive oil, she pours it all on the feet of Jesus. John says that the fragrance filled the house. And I'm sure it smelled great. For $45,000, it better smell good. But the question is that too much? Is that extravagant? Well, it depends. Extravagant is the word that most preachers use to describe this setting. They talk about Mary's extravagant love and her extravagant gift. That seems appropriate when you're pouring $45,000 worth of perfume on somebody's feet. Certainly that's how the disciples looked at it. So was her gift extravagant? Was it too much? I recently read about Leonardo DiCaprio, the Oscar-winning actor. Once he rented a yacht for $400,000 a week to go on a sailing spree. Now, as you can imagine, that yacht came with every sort of fancy adornment. It had world-class amenities. But the question is $400,000 a week extravagant? Well, it would be for me, and I think it would be for most of you. But Leonardo DiCaprio is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He probably didn't think of it as extravagant. Did you know that the most expensive hotel room in the world goes for $82,000 a night? It's the Royal Penthouse Suite. It has 12 bedrooms in all. It's at the Hotel President Wilson in Geneva, Switzerland. When I travel, I stay at a Comfort Inn, or Best Western, or, that's about as fancy as I can get. But Bill Gates has stayed at the Royal Penthouse Suite, yet he's worth about $79 billion. So it probably didn't seem too extravagant to him. The most expensive bottle of wine in the world sold for $310,000. Is that extravagant? In 2014, a 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO sold at auction for $34 million. That's a lot of money. But whoever bought it probably thought it was a good investment. And then there's a story about $1 million bottle of perfume. The $1 million price tag evidently goes for the bottle, which the bottle itself contains 183 sapphires, 2,700 white diamonds, 15 pink diamonds, a 3-carat ruby, and a 4-carat diamond, and various assorted other gems. All told, the bottle contains just under 3,000 precious stones that have been fashioned to resemble the New York City skyline. The process took nearly 1,500 hours to complete. I don't care who you are, I think we can all agree that's extravagant. But extravagance is in the eye of the beholder. When we talk about something being extravagant, we're always talking about somebody else, what somebody else is spending. Usually someone a whole lot richer than we are. So how much is too much? How much is too extravagant? Well, nobody knows. Everybody agrees that Taj Mahal in India is one of the wonders of the world. It was built in 1632 by Shah Jahan in memory of his third wife who died in childbirth. What would it cost to replace it? How do you replace the irreplaceable? One source on the internet said it would cost anywhere between $10 billion and $1 trillion to replace the Taj Mahal. Is that too much? How can you even answer a question like that? But whatever else we may say, Mary's gift of expensive nard didn't seem to be too extravagant to her. She wasn't trying to show off. She wasn't trying to make a statement about her wealth. But John points out that Judas objected to this wasteful extravagance. But Matthew and Mark made it clear the other disciples joined in. They were indignant and angry over the fact that Mary would spend so much on perfume that was just poured out at Jesus' feet. Why not use the money to feed the poor? That was a good question, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But the question is, why did Mary do this? Now remember, Jesus had recently raised Lazarus from the dead. And if you think about it, this is the only time in history where 2 men who would be raised from the dead ate at the same table. Lazarus had already been raised, and Jesus would be raised in about 6-7 days. So it was an utterly remarkable occasion. When Mary saw Jesus raise her brother, it revealed to her that Jesus was much more than a teacher or a prophet. She knew he had power and authority that could come only from God. Now, in the Old Testament, only 4 groups of people were anointed: kings, prophets, priests, and the dead. Jesus fits the first 3 groups, and in a few days he'll join the 4th group. It seems that Mary understood Jesus and his plight better than his own men did. Now, Warren Wiersbe points out that Mary took center stage in 3 times in the New Testament, and all 3 times she is sitting at Jesus' feet. In Luke 10, she wants to hear the words of Jesus. In John 11, she wants to experience the works of Jesus. And in John 12, she wants to declare the worth of Jesus. She did not come to eat the meal. She did not come to fellowship with the others. She did not come to ask a question. She did not even come to listen. She came to give her very best to Jesus. Now, her desire to honor Jesus violates all sorts of customs of that day. A woman would not normally sit at a man's feet, much less let down her hair in public, and certainly not wipe his feet with her hair. It was, in a sense, a very private act that others were permitted to see. But when Judas objects to Mary's anointing of Jesus' feet with the expensive perfume, Jesus responds this way. He said, "Leave her alone. She has kept it for the day of my burial." Now that statement could not make much sense to the disciples at that point in time. They would understand it after the crucifixion. But does it mean she had some kind of special knowledge about Jesus' death? Certainly he had spoken about it on numerous occasions. Perhaps she had the sort of intuition that women seem to have about these things. No doubt she sensed that the gathering clouds of hatred and opposition. She would have realized that Jesus didn't fit in the world of the Pharisees and the other religious leaders. No man who hung out with drunkards and prostitutes and who was called the friend of sinners could last very long. He touched a leper. He let a prostitute touch him. Perhaps Mary surveyed the scene and concluded Jesus, whom she loved dearly, was not long for this world. True, deep love, honest-to-goodness love can't be explained. Even when you see it, you don't understand it. Judas had a good point, but so what? Love has its reasons, and those reasons can't always be spelled out. What can we say about Mary? She is all in. She's fully committed, and she doesn't care what other people think. I'm sure she heard the remarks that Judas and the others were making, but I doubt they bothered her. A woman who would do what she did isn't likely to worry about what other people think. Mary's gift to Jesus was so extravagant and so radical, his top men couldn't understand it. And that leads me to one further thought. If my faith, if my love for Jesus never causes me to do things that make no sense to others, including my Christian friends, then perhaps I'm playing it way too safe. If everything I say and everything I do seems perfectly comprehensible to the world, then I need to do some soul searching. The world says Mary was a fool to do what she did. Did the world say that about you and me? That's really too close for comfort. And that's one of the reasons why this story is in the Bible. So we look at what Mary did. But the second question I want you to focus on is, why was Judas so upset? Why was Judas so upset? The text continues in verse 4. Then one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was about to betray him, said, "Why wasn't this fragrant oil sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor?" He didn't say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. He was in charge of the money bag and would steal part of what was put in it. Now, in thinking about this, keep 2 things in mind. At this point, Judas isn't yet the Judas we know. And John is looking back with 20/20 hindsight when he puts in the comment about he was about to betray him and that he was a thief. And that's why John says he is about to betray him. Mary anoints Jesus' feet on Saturday night. Judas will betray Jesus 5 days later. So Judas isn't the bad guy that we know to become. He's going to become when he makes this decision. But the second thing we need to keep in mind is that when Matthew and Mark tell the same story, they point out that many, perhaps most, if not all, of the other disciples made the same objection. Judas may be the one that spoke up, but what he said, what the other people were thinking. Now, at this point in the story, no one has any reason to suspect his coming betrayal. After all, you don't put a suspicious character in charge of the money bag. You give it to someone you trust. So that means the other disciples held Judas in high regard. And it also means they were not good judges of character because Judas fooled them completely. That brings us to his objection, though. Remember that 300 denarii, 9 months' salary, would be about $45,000 in today's terms. So where did Mary get that money to buy that expensive nard? No one knows, and it's quite useless to speculate. But what can't be denied was that her gift was radical, and in the eyes of the disciples, reckless. Why waste the perfume by pouring it on Jesus' feet? Why not give it to the poor? But Jesus' response shows that he welcomed Mary's extravagance. Look again at verse 7 and 8. He said, "Leave her alone, for she has kept it for the day of my burial. For you always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me." Now, if you read that one way, it makes Jesus sound rather callous, as if he doesn't care about the poor. But in reality, he's alluding to Deuteronomy 15:11, where he says, "There will never cease to be poor people in the land. That is why I'm commanding you. You must willingly open your hand to your afflicted and your poor brother in your land." It's as if Jesus is saying, don't use your phony compassion as an excuse to criticize Mary. The law commands you to show kindness to the poor. You're to always care for them. Nothing is stopping you from taking your money and giving it to them right now. So seen in that light, the words of Jesus are both a rebuke and a challenge. Spend your own money on the poor and stop criticizing Mary for showing such amazing devotion and love. But don't miss this insight. Whenever anybody becomes extravagant in their worship, the devil always stirs up trouble. It's not surprising that as Mary is worshiping, Judas speaks up and tries to ruin that beautiful moment. It was Satan trying to change the subject. If he could stop our worship, he will get us arguing amongst ourselves. And soon enough, we'll stop worshiping altogether and spend all of our time arguing. Truth of the matter is, the devil hates extravagant worship. What happened after the wise men brought the gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh to the baby Jesus in Matthew chapter 2? Well, in the very next passage, Herod set out to kill all the baby boys of Bethlehem. Here's the fundamental difference between Mary and Judas. Mary loved Jesus. Judas loved money. You can't love Jesus and love money at the same time. You have to choose. You will hate one and love the other. Mary made her choice. Judas made his. I wonder what choice we have made. Now, Jesus was clearly pleased with what Mary did. And that doesn't conflict at all with his caring for the poor. But in this case, Mary chose the better part, even though the men thought she was crazy to do what she did. But she was right. and they were wrong. And Judas was worse off than anyone knew that night. Mary showed her uninhibited devotion to Jesus, which shocked the disciples who saw it. In this case, radical love is better than phony compassion. Now, there are several lessons here, lessons that apply to us today. Question is, do you love Jesus? Well, do you? Do you love Jesus? Well, be good. Don't be afraid to show it. Don't worry if people don't understand your love for Jesus. Here are a few implications and lessons that we can learn from this story. First of all, true love can't be explained. It can only be observed. Second, if we become radical in our love for Jesus Christ, our close friends most likely will not understand us. Third, there are moments when we must act, even if no one else joins us. We ought not to criticize those who express their love for the Lord differently than we do. And if my love for Jesus never leads me to take a risk, then how much do I really love Him? Let's wrap this up in one verse not found in John, but rather found in Matthew chapter 26, verse 13. Jesus said, "Wherever this gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be told in memory of her." Here we are 2,000 years later and we're still talking about it. As Jesus spoke these words, the fragrance of the perfume filled the house. Eventually, the aroma will reach those on the roof. It would soon spread to nearby houses. Soon, everybody would know about Mary's amazing gift. She did it for Jesus, but everybody benefited, even Judas, who disapproved of it. Heartfelt worship never stays private. Her gift honored Jesus, but it blessed everyone around her. So it is with our worship. Years ago, I read this quote from Jess Moody. He said, "People choose a church with their noses. They can smell the joy." Joy is hard to define, but you know it when you smell it. When joy is in the air, it brings with it the aroma of heaven. I think something like that happened that night at Bethany. The aroma of heaven was in the air, and everyone could smell it. Mary loved so extravagantly, she scandalized the apostles. And that's why we're still talking about her 2,000 years later. The words of Isaac Watts from the hymn, "When I Survey the Wondrous Cross," seems to fit this text. He wrote, "Were the whole realm of nature mine, that were a present far too small, love so amazing, so divine, demands my soul, my life, my all." Let me make the simplest application as possible. Don't let anyone tell you to back off your love for Jesus. Don't let anyone talk you into being reasonable in your joy. Don't let anyone talk you into playing it safe. How much is too much love for Jesus? There is no such thing. Do you love Jesus? Then let your affections for Him be lavish. And don't worry about what anybody else thinks. How much is too much. Father God, we come to you. We tell you all the time, we say the words that we love you. But I wonder if we've ever gone to any length of extravagance like Mary did to show our love, to show it to you, and in showing it to you, to anybody else who just happens to see it. May we have that kind of love, that kind of devotion. May we live only for you. Sometimes we're guilty of just wondering what everybody else might think. But the only thing that matters is, what do you think? How can we please you? How can we live for you? How can we love you and demonstrate that love to you? May we love you in such a way that nobody in this world would ever doubt where we stand with you. Let us be a Mary. And risk being extravagant in the expression of our love for you. Not for the attention it may draw to us, but because of the attention it will draw to you. It's all about you. We love you, Lord. Amen. Do you love Jesus with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might? Or do you only say that you do? Be extravagant in your expression of love. Let's close by expressing in song our love for Him.